Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk with Riz Khan. This is episode 5 and it's titled Top Exam Revision Tricks and Tips. This is your Premier Learning and Growth podcast available on YouTube and across all major podcasting platforms including Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Now in today's episode I'm going to be offering you some tips and tricks to the nation's and the world's young people who are gearing up for exam or assessment season, whether they are GCSEs or A-levels or IB exams or any other forms of university assessments. Hopefully, if you are a parent or a child, a student or even a teacher, today's episode will give you some insights into some of my tried and tested exam revision tips and techniques that I've shared with students from years 6 to 12 and teachers around the world as well in teacher and leadership education workshops. But we all have been through exams. We've all been through assessments of any form, whether it's preparing for a driving test or school-based or college or university-based assessments. We understand how challenging and how nerve-wracking they can be. I do have my own opinions about standardized tests and whether or not they truly reflect real learning, which, as we understand in the modern world, assessment, it needs to be more authentic, more centered on real life contexts and scenarios. But until the systems change, we still have to work with what we've got. Now, exam and assessment time is upon us here in England, and this generation especially, not only in England but globally, has had a turbulent and a tricky time because of the pandemic, which has impacted their school time, their school careers. So they've had a bit of a mixed bag of face-to-face teaching and distance learning and teaching scenarios, which obviously do alleviate and increase levels of stress and anxiety, but hopefully some of these tips and tricks will help you to work independently to prepare for your exams, no matter what they are going to be, for schools or even for the workplace as well. I've got around about 7 tips or tricks that you're going to unpack with me today. And the first one is linked to, I think, the first episode of Real Talk with Riz Khan, which is titled Starting with the End in Mind. And this notion or concept or idea is also transferable to the idea of getting ready for exams and assessments as well. Starting with the end in mind. And what I mean by that in the exam scenario is, what does success look like? Are you familiar with the assessment criteria or the standards for success or the mark scheme? Do you have models or example of previous student work that you can refer to so that you can understand your assessment expectations better? So the first tip is starting with the end in mind, having an idea, a clear vision, an idea of what success looks like with an understanding of the standards for success. Make sure you know what is expected of you. The second tip I have is around practice and how do we get better at driving? We get better at driving by practicing being out on the road. And similarly, we get better at exams by practicing the skill of taking exams. And you might be able to access and utilize previous examination questions or assessment papers to give you a sense of the style of questions and the format and the content that you need to prepare for. And this can also help you to lessen and decrease some of the nerves and anxiety that is experienced around assessments. So a huge trick that I have also linked to this, that I've taught to many of my year 11 and year 12 students in international education, is for them to create their own exam papers. Now, typically teachers will hand previous exam specimens or previous exam papers to their students, but I would encourage you to flip that approach and encourage your students to devise and create their own exam questions using previous exam formats and content available. And the impact of this is twofold. Not only would the students get used to the styles of questions that they are expected to answer, they might be able to develop a deeper understanding of the content also that they need to revise as well. So this trick of encouraging young people to devise and create their own exam papers based on samples available from previous years is a really powerful and impactful way of getting our young people to have a deeper understanding of the exam and the type of questions, and also how to approach these as well. The third trick I have is chunking, and you might be familiar with this, and whether it's breaking down revision content into smaller, more manageable chunks, or structuring your content or topics, or even breaking down larger content into more concise and more focused chunks can be really helpful when you've got lots of content to revise. And subjects that are heavy on content, like humanities-based subjects, science or math type subject, breaking it down and chunking this using a range of tools like graphic organizers is a really good strategy of helping you to chunk ideas and content. And there are lots available. If you do an internet search of graphic organizers, you'll come across a whole range. So you can pick one that is suitable to the type of assessment that you have and the content that you are revising. But some of the ones that we might be familiar with are mind maps, but there are also things like concept maps, flow diagrams that you can use and incorporate into your revision techniques and your revision approach. The fourth one is much difficult than it actually sounds. The fourth trick I have shared with many students, many teachers, and modeled this myself as well. It's a very challenging activity, which is changing text into images or symbols. Now, the rule is that if you give students a text that they have to learn or revise, they have to recreate that text using images or symbols only. And the idea is that it activates a much higher level of thinking, because the young people will have to read and synthesize what they've read and regurgitate that in the form of a product, in this case, a visual or a symbol. And I've used this for teachers and students, and it works immensely in helping students to remember, to retain what they're learning, so that the next day you don't forget what you've learned. So changing text into images is a really powerful way of helping you to retain what you have learned or read or comprehended. The fifth tip or trick that I have is feedback. Many educational researchers highlight and remind us of the importance of regular feedback. For example, John Hattie out of Australia reminds us through his research on the importance of providing opportunities for regular feedback, which can have a positive impact on student learning outcomes. So accessing the mark scheme, accessing the assessment criteria, or accessing the standards for success and applying them to your own work or the work of your peers will help you to get a closer understanding of what is expected of you. So, for example, once you've created your practice exam question, once you have answered the exam question or responded to it, you can self-assess your own work using the standards for success, so that you can understand your strengths, you can know what you're doing well, and understand where some of your next steps might be, whether it is you need to go back and revise an area, or even you need to work on the skill of the exam, such as time management and practicing responding to the exam in a set and time-bound situation. You could also apply this technique with a small group, with a friends in a face-to-face, or even in online or remote scenarios. But feedback is a really important mechanism that you should be thinking about and incorporating and building it into your exam revision. The sixth technique that I have is a timely start. And we've all been in scenarios and we've all been in situations where we've told ourselves to begin early and we've done the exact opposite. We've ignored our own advice and left it too late or last minute. Now, procrastination, it only increases and adds to levels of stress and anxiety. So it is better to make an earlier start when it is possible, A long late night hours of revision and cramming things in is actually counterproductive to retention and recalling what you need to remember. But there are some tools. There are strategies that you can apply to help structure and organize your time, such as Gantt charts or a schedule or a timetable. And also, if you do an internet search, you might be able to find lots of different timetables which will help you to prioritize your work so that you have a little bit of a routine leading up to exam season. The seventh trick and tip that I have is around finding your purpose. And the seventh trick is when the going gets tough, when the exam season is taking a little bit of its toll, when you're feeling that sense of anxiety or stress or pressure, bring yourself back to the why. Find purpose and meaning and value and relevance in what you're doing and why you're doing this. So, for example, how will this exam help you in your next steps, in your personal or in your professional careers and lives? What could be the benefits or the value add of succeeding in your exam? What are your goals, and how might this exam contribute to getting closer to your goals and dreams and aspirations and ambitions? I've also remembered sharing this technique to a teacher who I was observing in a classroom when I was a head of languages, a teacher who was fairly new in their career and had a very challenging class. And my feedback to that teacher was, bring yourself back to the purpose. Why did you start teaching in the first place? And this advice will carry you through, and it's transferable into many aspects of life and professions and industries. When the going gets tough, bring yourself back to the why, the purpose, the central goal of why you're doing this. And mums and dads, here is where you could potentially come in as well. Not to preach, but just to ask questions like, how can we at home best support you at this time? Is there anything we can do or change or add or bring to you at home to help you get through exam season? Work with your young people and don't be sort of top down and preaching at them, because that can be, again, quite counterproductive. And often ensuring that the home environment is comfortable, is distraction free. That's often a good starting point. If your child is struggling to get started, sit down with them and apply some of the techniques that I've shared in this episode with, just like going to the gym. You know, the difficult part of going to the gym is getting there. But once you're there, you consider, why did I waste time on procrastinating? It's the same with exam time as well. Often the most challenging part is getting started. But we understand to make a start, you have to make a beginning. So at home, if you can help your child make a beginning with their revision, whether it's the environment or whether it's applying and sharing some of the tools and strategies that I have offered in this podcast, it could help them to succeed. So to sum up, the first tip or trick is to start with the end in mind. Understand the success criteria and understand the end goal, the end point, and the standard for success. The second one is to practice. Just like you drive, you get better at driving through practicing. You get better at scoring goals by practicing scoring goals. It's the same transferable notion when it comes to exam revision as well. Get better at the skill by taking previous exam papers, create your own exam papers, become familiar with the timing, the structure, the types of questions, and identify your strengths and gaps in learning, and use that information to inform your next revision steps and sessions. The third technique I offered was chunking and breaking down larger chunks of revision and content into smaller, more manageable chunks. And you can use a lot of visuals. You can use graphic organizers to help you organize that content as well. And the fourth one is to change text into images, much more challenging than it actually sounds. This is a higher order thinking skill that really helps you to build a deeper connection with what you're learning, and it also helps you to retain, to remember what you're learning far longer as well. The fifth one I offered was the concept of feedback, whether you sit and assess your own work, self-assess, or assess your friends or your peers' work against the standards, against a mark scheme or criteria. It can help you understand what is going to be expected of you in your exam. The sixth one is make a start to make a beginning, a timely start to your revision. And we've all come across or heard that phrase or saying to make a start, to make a beginning, and also to make sure that you set yourself enough time to schedule and prioritize your work. And I offered some tools such as a Gantt chart, a schedule, or timetables that you can access to structure the time that you have between now and your exam. And the last one is that when the going gets tough, bring yourself back to the purpose, the why. Why are you doing this exam? What's the bigger or macro purpose to this exam? How is this going to be helping you to move towards and contribute and go closer to your future dreams, goals, and aspirations? So that concludes episode number 5, Top Exam Revision Tricks and Tips. I hope that you're able to pick up one or two or more or all and apply them to your school, your college or university, or even work and life-based assessments as well. On that note, I wish you and every student and young people the best of success for their exam season. And with the grace of God, we wish you the best of success in preparing for the next stages in your life and careers and the next stages in your education as well. Until the next time we connect, thank you for listening and watching to Real Talk with Riz Khan, and good health and blessings to all.